Welcome to CharityVillage Connects. Over the past 5 years, the historic and role of philanthropy in upholding colonial structures and injustices has raised important questions about how philanthropic organizations can evolve to be a force of good for the future. With the recent changes to the disbursement quota and the regulations around funding non-qualified donees, the rise in community-centered fundraising and the revelations around the chronic lack of funding to Indigenous, Black, and women's organizations and causes, it's clear that philanthropy, as we've known it, may be ready for a shakeup. Joining us to discuss these important issues is Jean Marc Mangin. Jean Marc is President and CEO of the Philanthropic Foundations Canada. Jean Marc has been President and CEO of Philanthropic Foundations of Canada since 2019, and he's energized by foundations working together and with civil society partners and governments to strengthen the common good. Welcome to CharityVillage Connects, Jean Marc.
I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
I wonder if you could start off by telling us about your organization, who you represent, and the work that those foundations do in Canada.
So Philanthropic Foundations Canada has been around for 20 years, and its role is to strengthen philanthropy in all of its diversity, because when you meet one foundation, you only meet one foundation, and we have nearly 10,000 foundations in Canada. And so to strengthen philanthropy in all diversity, to support their work towards a more just, a more inclusive, and a more sustainable society. So in terms of membership, we have about 135 foundations that are members of PFC, of this network. They represent roughly 50% of all assets managed by foundations in this country.
So could you give us a scale of just what are we talking about in very high level numbers that we're talking about when you say that?
So when we say that, but most foundations are quite small, so that they have assets that of less than $1 million. And then you have a range of foundations. We have one mega foundation in this country. There's a MasterCard Foundation that's got an asset of above $40 billion. So and then we have a few other foundations above the $1 billion mark. Most are in terms of the membership for PFC goes in terms from $50 million to about $700 million in assets. And in terms of the programming is very rich in all areas of where civil society is active, from the arts to health to education. You will very often found a foundation that in the background is supporting the work of these frontline organizations.
And I wonder if you could explain, just for those who may not be entirely aware of the details and the nuances, what the difference between a public foundation and a private foundation is, and who makes up your members?
So most of our members are private foundations, but we do have an increasing number of public foundations as members. So and most of our private foundations are family foundations. So a family decided to establish a foundation to give back to society and doing their philanthropy together. So they do not have an arm's length relationship with the foundation. By definition, they are very close. The families are on the board table. They may have a few external members, but it's considered a private foundation. A public foundation, and those that are you can demonstrate an arm's length relationship with the foundation. So they do not have a kind of a personal relationship. They both private and public have to support charitable purposes. But in terms of governance, there's a difference between private and public. So that's why we welcome both types of foundations as members of PFC.
And are foundations and philanthropists doing enough to support the nonprofit sector, especially when facing such challenging times since the COVID pandemic? I would say the causes that the nonprofit sector are actually trying to trying to meet in terms of making benefits to society.
Yeah, it's undeniable that the sector is facing increasing challenges, especially as government support has been withdrawn. That is COVID. That was COVID related, and that the kind of earned revenues and fundraising activities have not come back to the level of that was there previously to the pandemic. So a great deal of pressure. The ability to attract and retain volunteers is on the decline. Because what's happening in the labor market, it's very hard to maintain your good staff are being poached by government and the private sector. At higher salaries. So a lot of challenges. Foundation have stepped up. All indications show that the granting is up, but this granting cannot replace government support in this other source of funding. So so if you were to kind of nationalize all the assets of foundation, say we don't need foundation, we need the help now. This only represents a few months of the cost of the healthcare system in Canada. And then you have no more foundation, no more assets to support the grants year after year after year. So foundation cannot replace governments, but they can support activities that can go up to scales eventually in areas where the civil society is trying to address new challenges, and complement support that from others, from these other sources of funding, and provide more flexibility, ideally, to organization. And we've seen greater funding, we've seen greater flexibility, we've seen moves from very earmark, time bound, like 1 year project, to multi-year programs to support the core costs of an organization, as opposed to specific projects. So and we've seen changes to the way of reporting and the kind of monitoring and reporting requirements that have been simplified. So the foundations are trying to show up differently, recognizing that the challenges are very real. At the same time, many foundations want to be here for the long term. They either support an issue like on climate, or support an issue on childcare, where you know that to move the dial will take a long time. You need to engage for a very long time to make a difference. So the ability to be there over a 20, 25, 40 year period is a consideration in the foundation choices. That yes, they want to be as generous as possible, but they want to maintain the capacity to be there over the long-term period. And again, foundation are one of the only entities that can think long-term like this. On government, you have elections every 4 or 5 years. Private sector firms, you have stakeholder, you have your quarterly reports. So you need to demonstrate results. So the ability to think long-term is a very strong capacity, recognizing the urgencies of now, that there are real problems now, real challenges now, to do as much as we can. So my conclusion of that is that we need more philanthropy, not less. That the needs are so great that you need more donors, from individual Canadians, but also more foundations, because the range of causes and the needs that currently exist, they could easily absorb this additional philanthropists in the space.
So I understand that sort of the rationale for foundations, being able to some extent control the amount of disbursements that they give under the foundation is also, the rationale is in part to be able to continue to maintain disbursements for a longer period of time, to give back for a longer period of time. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, and that some foundations have been here long enough that they have granted more than their actual endowment, because they've been able to have good returns over a long period of time, so that let's say if you've been around for the last 30 years and you have $90 million in your endowment, but you actually granted out more than $90 million over that period of time. Plus, you still have the $90 million today. You can still do similar work, moving in the future. So that's a very powerful instrument. I mean, many organizations, as soon as they have the opportunity, because I come from the NGO sector, have endowment of their own, because they recognize that to the power of that tool to able to support programming that's harder to get specific donors to commit over a long term, and to have government cover these kinds of cost or program initiative. So the endowment is a very powerful tool, but it's not the be all and end all. So other foundations have made the choice of giving the who's around the board table, the kind of issues that they're working on, that they see the lifespan of the foundation over a 15 to 20 year period. So we have increasing number of foundations that are I call a spend down foundation. They come into this, like, we want to make our difference over a shorter period of time, and then pass on the baton to someone else. The most public example of that is the Ivey Foundation, which was announced last year. They're wrapping up within a 5-year period, because the climate emergency is so urgent, that they feel that the difference is now, and that the ecosystem on climate policy, where they've been very active, has evolved a great deal, and there's other players in the ecosystem that now exists. So these are both the perpetuity model and the spend down model are legitimate ways of doing philanthropy. So that pluralism of approaches is a strength, because it's not one size fits all in terms of the needs of the community, but also the kind of the way that foundation approach their work is very, very diverse, and we can learn from different approaches in terms of the impact, the ways of doing work. So the part of the role of PFC is like share these learnings about the actual practice of philanthropy, and see what are the most impactful and meaningful ways of doing philanthropy, and there's more than one way, and but what's in common in different ways is there's a certain rigor that comes with that just wanting to make a difference is not enough. That you have to understand the context, that you have to invest in your relationship with your partners. So that's common through different ways of doing philanthropy, and then from you have to look at your granting, you have to look at the investment, you have to look at the way that you able to support your partners differently. That may not involve money, might involve convening them, strengthening their capacity, strengthening their voices, using your own voices in terms of advocacy on some policy issues. So that and different foundations will make different choices on these questions, and that's fine. It's actually it's a strength of the system that we have 10,000 foundations making 10,000 different type of choices on these things. But this strength, instead of having simply the government or the market finding solution, you have these foundations that are independent, partisan-free, and looking at ways of contributing at the public good differently. I think it strengthens the web of civil society and the dynamism and the impact of civil society in this country. And given what's happened, the challenge to our democratic societies that we've witnessed over the last few years, it's a very important asset that needs to be built up.
I certainly understand that you've expressed the value proposition for foundations in terms of its flexibility, and that example you gave about climate and the urgency around that is very illuminating. Certainly, though, in recent years, there's been many calls to make changes to foundation giving, including increasing the disbursement quota, creating more avenues to funding non-qualified donees. And there's also a movement that seems to be towards trust-based giving. Where do you think we are with all these changes and today? And has the sector gone far enough? Where do you see this going, these changes?
So these are the three sets of big questions you just raised, and PFC has been involved on all three. So on the disbursement quota, we have a new disbursement quota regime since January 1st of this year. It's now 5%. PFC was in support of an increase from 3.5 to 5, along with the periodic review that every 5 years you look at what's happening in inflation. You look at actually look at the actual rates of returns of endowments and see if you need to adjust the DQ upwards, downwards, or keep it the way it is. And the government has accepted the recommendation to go up to 5 and put the periodic review. We also said this is not sufficient in terms of the concerns of broadening philanthropy and the fact that there are many blind spots and some important actors in Canadian society were receiving very little from philanthropy. And one way of leveling the playing field was to make it easier for charities, including foundations, to support non-qualified donees that are often led by people of color, by the Indigenous community. And we work very hard with other partners in Canada to change the rules on that. So we were successful in last year, and it required a significant advocacy effort on our part to convince the government to change the rules. So the law has already been passed, and now we're working with CRA in terms of having guidelines so people understand how to support non-qualified donees and to make it as easy as possible. Otherwise, the risk is by increasing DQ, the same beneficiaries will just receive more money. It could still happen because the non-qualified door is not compulsory. It's something we encourage foundations to use, and several do. We have several of our members that have worked with non-qualified donees for a long period of time. But there's also a recognition that not sufficient resources are not going to some of the most vulnerable segment of society, and we need collectivity to do more, while recognizing that each foundation remains independent and autonomous. And then you non-qualified, and then the last point of trust-based philanthropy. So trust-based philanthropy is a way of doing philanthropy. There's a great deal of interest on that notion. People use different definition of a trust-based philanthropy. It's not set in stone, and it's not a formula. But trust has always been a core element of having genuine relationships with in partnership with your partners and grantees. But it's also kind of helping shape conversations. What are we actually trying to achieve here? Who's driving the bus? And if it's a real partnership, the donor should not set the terms of what's what's being achieved, recognizing this real value and real expertise in the organization that's actually doing the work, even though they are lacking in financial resources to do it. So as part of that relationship, and say, okay, well, this is what we're trying to achieve together. Are you interested to be part of this journey? So they for me that's kind of a um, exciting way of reconfining, the reconfigurating the kind of our partnership could evolve. At the same time, it's not a kind of silver bullet. It's not like 5 or 6 magic step that you take and you become this has become trust based philanthropy. But good philanthropy is actually hard work because you have to spend the time to understand the context, to understand the needs of your partners, to have real, frank, and candid conversation going both ways of the challenges of achieving impact, and what you need from your donors, and what you see in your partners' strengths, but also weaknesses that needs to be addressed. So that these are real partnership, and it goes both ways in terms of working together. So the language of trust-based philanthropy is useful as long as we don't understand it as a new orthodoxy that this is a way that you must do philanthropy.
Yes, I understand it. In fact, I kind of struggle with what is meant with trust-based philanthropy myself, because I understand obviously it has to be regulated in some capacity as well. But it seems to be inherent behind the movement of being able to give to non-qualified donees, that there is this level of trust that is a part of that relationship. Otherwise, it wouldn't have passed into law, and it does anticipate oversight in any case of the relationship. Nevertheless, I guess under less restraining or restraint in terms of strictures of the regulations. But
yeah. So for your audience, we're essentially moving from a regime where it was possible to support non-qualified donees before. The non-qualified donee is a bureaucratic term meaning not-for-profit that provide a public benefit but are not charities.
Correct.
So before, charities could support non-qualified donees by having a service agreement of some kind, essentially treating these organizations as contractees. And so this is not a basis of good and imposing direction and control. So this is not a basis for good partnership. So now we move to a system that you can treat the qualified donees that provide a public benefit that's in line with the charitable purpose on essentially on equal footing than charities, so it removes the administrative burden both on the donor and on the grantee. And should make it a lot easier to have real and genuine partnerships in place. And our challenge collectively is to encourage foundations to use that door, and to learn from others that are using that door, so we can broaden philanthropy. When I talk to foundations, that they all want to be the best funder possible. So why stop yourself if the best organization that achieve results in the area that you're interested in is a non-qualified donee? Go for it. You don't have to be limited to supporting only charities. But we will track with and many people, and many, not only PSC but others, will track what does actually happen over time. Are we using this new pathway to broaden philanthropy?
So, a great deal of the background information that led to these changes are really some recent reports and that have echoed over the years, but certainly there have been recent reports about the chronic lack of funding to Black, Indigenous, and feminist charities and causes. You've talked about it, all these changes not being a silver bullet, but from your perspective, what needs to change in the philanthropic community to ensure that funding is more equitable and is truly addressing the inequalities that exist in Canada, in your view?
Yeah, but I'm very excited about the fact that the landscape is changing. We do have new players that, in terms of feminist philanthropy, the Equality Fund, in terms of Black-led philanthropy, the Foundations for Black Community, We have the Indigenous People Resilience Fund. We have the work of the Circle on philanthropy for. To both do the education but also be a conduit for funding into communities where many funders don't have long-term relationship. So the ability to reach more communities now exists. So that's very exciting. Again, it does not mean that you must use these new organizations as a way of doing the work, but you can learn a great deal and then establish and see in your own philanthropy that if you want to establish the different kind of relationship with new partners that you would learn about by working with these new foundations and funds. For me, that's very exciting because these were missing pieces in the ecosystem, and now we have them. They are new organizations, so they'll be on a learning curve, and but the fact that they did not exist 5 years ago and now they do is very significant. But as in solve the kind of funding issue in that short-term period, I mean, the work remains to be done. But there are many more opportunities and touch points for that work now to happen.
Well, to that point, it's exciting to see these changes, but are there systemic barriers that still exist even after this new legislation and the changes to the distribution quota have come into play? Are there existing systemic barriers that still exist that you think need to change in order to improve the equitable distribution of philanthropic funds?
Yeah, so I mean, we said from the beginning that increase from disbursement quota is not sufficient. You need enabling condition. You need a much greater awareness to the kind of the structural barriers that exist in our society. I think as a country, we've gone through the painful education of what's happened to Indigenous people in this country, and we're coming to terms with that. We're going through a similar exercise that really sped up during the pandemic in terms of our communities of colors, in particular the Black community in Canada. So it's like a recognition. It's a recognition that structural racism is a reality. It's a historical reality, and that these barriers don't vanish all of a sudden. So we need to work hard to overcome them. As PFC, we launch kind of peer cohorts to talk about justice and diversity and equality and inclusion. And what does it mean in your governance? What does it mean in your programming? What does it mean in your investment? So so this is something we launched during the pandemic, and we now have the second cohort of this program into place. So to respond to that need from our members, think we want to learn more how to do this work better. And again, there's no this silver bullet, because you need to recognize to what's under your control as a funder that where you can make change, the challenge of your partners, and some of the broader issues that are impending progress as a society. So these barriers very much exist. The first step is to acknowledge that they are there, understand why they're there, and see as civil society actors where can we actually make a difference. So on some issues, I mean, the government has to take the lead. On the other issues, civil society can take the lead. And in that respect, to make the kind of courageous move that are required. The Inspirit Foundation it's a very small foundation in Toronto, but they're doing very interesting work and supporting narratives by Muslim community, by Black-led community, community of colors. So we could learn from their reality of being Canadian in this country, and helping us in that kind of understanding, and the so the again, it's not in spirit doing the work, it's in spirit providing resources, accompanying I can't say the word in English, accompaniment of these partners for the voice to reach us in meaningful ways, and ways that we can engage with at a different audience, from youth to people of a certain age, including myself in that. And so it's kind of very exciting work of enhancing agencies and the self-determination of this community, and sometimes with very hard-hitting message from that. And that's okay. That's, I think, then you can start engaging, have greater awareness of what the issues are. But simply pretending that we have achieved the dream of being a just society it's not true. But we can, through our work, we can get closer to that idea of a more just society. So we and do the hard work to get there.
I'd like to know what your thoughts are on the growing income and wealth divide in Canada, and how that's impacting the public perception of philanthropy. Are you seeing both private and public funders facing greater scrutiny? I mean, we're understanding that if it's a private foundation, it's frequently a very wealthy family who's created this foundation. Are you concerned, or what are you seeing in terms of the public perception of this wealth difference and the divide in Canada on the public's perception of philanthropy and foundations generally, particularly private ones?
So rising wealth inequality in this country is a fact. It cannot be denied.
Right.
What I'm worried about, though, is a conflating of the issue of increasing wealth, increasing inequality, with foundation being part of that problem somehow. So yes, the wealth that's behind the foundation comes from this from these drivers. I'm more concerned about the impact of that philanthropic work. When you set up a foundation, it's no longer your personal toy. As a family, you establish a foundation with specific charitable purposes. Since this is what you are legally allowed to do. And every year you need to submit a report to the CRA. Every year you need to have a external audit of your finance to demonstrate that was the case. So the fact that you have an increasing number of families that want to give back, and an increasing number of corporations that want to do the same, and increasing group of citizens that come together, establish public foundations, that's a good thing. Yes, the source of the wealth comes from being a more rich country with greater inequalities within it. But addressing the inequalities in the country by going after foundation, that's a mistake. That's if you want to. And PFC doesn't have a view per se how to address race inequality, but you're looking at the tax policies of this country. You're looking at the kind of fiscal choices that we're making. For me, these are different issues. So that my concern is that foundation does the most impactful work that it can do and to support their charitable purpose, and these are valid, legitimate issues, but let's not confuse with they're not in the same pot, and there's a tendency in the criticism of wealth to put them in the same pot, that's somehow, if you just you would force foundation to spend more. It would address inequality. No, it would not address inequality. Then you would just have more people not giving. And like I want to get that encourage people of wealth to give back. That one of the reasons why they've been so successful in society is the public investment that we've made into infrastructure, into education, and to the social safety net that we have collectively. So that how can we make our country better? And that every donor that I talk to, that's what they're interested in. So yes, they have the origin story, the source of their wealth. That's for each of them to come to terms with that. It's as long as it was legal. For me, it's like, now you decide to give back, great. Let's help you make this philanthropy as meaningful as possible.
Now, I guess this is a question that is sort of in alignment with this last one that we just discussed. Your most recent investment and disbursement survey suggests that foundations are receiving higher than 5% returns on their investments, which hopefully that means that they're making good investments. Will changing the disbursement quota to 5% be enough to stop the accusation that we hear from some quarters that foundations are hoarding wealth instead of using it to actually disperse to solve today's most pressing issues? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so that's part of our the research work that we did, analysis that we did, looking over the last 20 years, yes, our most recent investment survey shows that the returns were slightly above 7%. But if you put in the disbursement quota of 5, there's a management fees for your fund, the cost of inflation, you get to 7% pretty quickly. So instead of these investment stories are important, but they're a snapshot in time. If we look over a 20-year period, our analysis showed that 5% is about as high as we can go, and still have a reasonable pathway, not a ironclad guarantee, but reasonable pathway that for foundations that want to protect the endowment and prevent significant erosion to that endowment. It's still possible to do over the long term. Now, since we push for that 5% DQ increase, inflation has exploded. It's coming down now. It's still at over 4%, but it was at 8% last year. The returns on the markets last year were very poor. So currently what's happening is there's no wealth, there's no accumulation of capital in the endowment. There's erosion of capital that's taking place. Because we have this long-term view, I don't get overly concerned over a 1-year period, and that's why we push for this periodic review that the government has accepted. Over an economic cycle, let's look at what's happening to inflation. Let's look at what's happening to returns, and let's make a evidence-based position, and adjustment. It might be the next story to tell, but the next assessment we might come to the conclusion that 4.5% is a more reasonable rate than 5. Or we can say, oh no, actually we can push it to a bit higher. But over that 20-year period, and 20 years is pretty long, 5% was like, because we went through a few economic cycle over that time period. It was just about the highest level that we, in our view, that we can do without eroding capital significantly. Some people say that we are at 5%, we're being too optimistic, that in fact erosion of capital will happen. So there's some disagreement in our analysis. Some people are saying that it's not far enough, not high enough. If you look at recent years pre-pandemic, the returns were very good. But that was for me kind of exceptional part of kind of market return over the long term. 5% with the low inflation is doable. At the high inflation rate that we've seen, and if it continues to go, let's hope it goes back to the band of 2 or 3% inflation, because that's a significant factor in eroding capital over the long term.
I would love to give you an opportunity to now talk about some important initiatives, including the Canadian Philanthropic commitment on climate change. Can you fill us in on the developments there?
So in the lead up to the COP in Glasgow, there was we're part of a global initiative. So encouraging foundation to be part of the solution to address the climate crisis, and that it affects all aspects of life, and you don't need to be a climate funder to be involved in adaptation and mitigation efforts. So as part of this, there was an international effort to develop a climate pledge, and we were along with our partners at CFC and the Circles and EFC, encouraging our community to step up. Over 50 foundations have signed the pledge so far, which represents more than 10% of all signatories worldwide of the pledge. But if the pledge is a mean to an end, so it's encouraging again foundation to see how can they provide this climate cleanse to their programming, that climate cleanse to the investment, and see if how they can kind of protect their investment for both on the granting side and the investment side for the world that we find ourselves. So integrating this climate lens of health or art programming or educational programming is very important. This work is not only for those who signed this pledge, it's open to all foundations. So we have many foundations that are intrigued. They have decided that they're not quite ready to sign the pledge, but they want to be part of that reflection, that learning. So they participate in this effort. For us, we've now decided to make this as a permanent feature of our programming, and we work very closely with our other partners to engage as many foundation as possible. It's both kind of urgency of now, but looking also over the long term. That is as a society. So how do we provide ourselves with the tools to make different kind of choices to address the climate crisis? So it's a recognition that it is an existential issue, and every foundation can make a difference within this sphere of activity.
You know, you've talked about your organization and its role in terms of educating other foundations and sharing success stories. Do you have any success stories or examples you'd like to share from foundations who are doing things differently or who are finding new ways to address some current inequalities?
Yeah, there's several, and I pointed out a few during in the previous question. We have the Definity Insurance, which is a new foundation that has been created by a group of insurance company, and they have decided that with a significant endowment, and they have decided that they will have an impact on these issues around inequality and addressing the kind of systemic causes. But also the environmental aspect of that over a 20-year period. So they right from the word go, because they being so new, they have the kind of flexibility to approach their programming and investment differently. and we have other foundations that also that have emerged over the recent years that are willing to push the envelope of the traditional ways that you ask for proposal, you ask your a few partners to put proposal on your desk, and you do your due diligence, you bring them to your board for approval. So that's not necessarily the way that some of these new foundations are operating. They're actually working. They almost like venture capitalists. They go out there and look for partners and say, "We want to invest in you. Are you interested to work together?" So that's kind of a different way of doing this work. The Graham Beck Foundation. It's a very small foundation based in Montreal. That's as from the word go has been working on mental health issues. And even though their granting is relatively modest, they've been able to have a huge impact in encouraging evidence-based way of delivering health services to youth differently through the kind of this they've done it by kind of using that convening, that research, piloting a few programs, sharing the results to the broader policy network, comparing that with what's happening internationally, and none of them have the kind of the Graham Beck doesn't rarely put this stamp as logo on anything, but they're recognized as a real leader in the space. Size does not always matter as well. We look at foundations that have a huge portfolio of projects. You could be a small foundation and achieve systemic impact. So for me, like the work of Graham Beck Foundation is very impressive in that regard. The Laidlaw Foundation is focused on youth. And bringing these youth voices into their governance, into the way they review their programs, and do the learning. Also very exciting. And this is a foundation that's been around for quite a bit of time, and willing to push the envelope to make these experiments and exposing themselves to failure, and in fact learning that you can actually do things differently and very successfully as well. So and it's kind of sharing these experiences between foundation. The work that the Rideau Hall Foundation has done through on the culture of giving, on promoting philanthropy in the Canadian North, and promoting innovation, also very interesting. The public foundation again kind of playing up, activating the fact that they're close to the Governor General's office and using that convening power to encourage other philanthropists to in kind of nation building exercise. Again, it's not a foundation with a huge amount of assets, but able to kind of help shift the narrative and show concrete pathways of how that's going to be done. I mean, I could talk about these stories for all 135 of our members, so we'll be here a while. But for me, that's kind of the exciting part that is not your grandpa philanthropy that you were referring to at the beginning. Many foundations are looking at ways of doing their philanthropy differently, not for change for the sake of change, for the sake of achieving greater impact.
So you've actually covered off a bit of what my last question was to actually presenting some examples of really not just whether you think that philanthropy as a leader of an organization devoted to philanthropic foundations. Not just whether you think that philanthropy is currently in need of being reimagined, but examples of how, in your view, they already are being reimagined by the foundations that you represent. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, I've been here for 4 years, and that's the strength of being the independence of foundation. If you want to change, there's little that stops you from changing. That the ability to take more risk is a great strength of philanthropy, and I see the kind of the network as a source of social risk capital for this country, and which other entity exists that can take these risks, can possibly fail, I mean, but learn from the failures, and still continue. If the program you support does not work, it does not mean your foundation closes its door in a few years from now, which would be the case for a business. In the government, you would lose office. In this case, you're able to integrate that learning, share that learning of both failures and successes, and build on that.
That is a really interesting point that you make, and one that I hadn't heard before. Jean Marc, your insight and perspective on the philanthropic community and the nuances and key issues impacting philanthropy in Canada is greatly appreciated and important for our audience to understand and for me to understand. Thank you for joining us at Charity Village Connects.
It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye.